waiting for you, Gordon, in the test chamber.
I said we were going back in time. I just didn't say how far back. Today, we're doing Half-Life. Half-Life is a first-person shooter developed in 1998 by Valve, the same Valve that later went on to create Half-Life 2, the Portal series, and Steam. Steam is currently the most famous online game market out there. Half-Life 2 is one of the most famous games of all time, and Half-Life 1 is considered by many to be the game that changed the way FPS games were designed. It switched the shooter design from high-action, fast-paced shooters inspired by titles such as Doom and Duke Nukem to games that sacrifice that instant action aspect in favor of story and atmosphere. Many claim that the game is a timeless classic that is infinitely replayable, and in this video we will see how well it holds up.
For God's sake, open the silo door! They're coming for us! It's our only way out!
The gameplay holds up, but it can get annoying at times. The shooting is generally good. There's a nice spread of weapons, which all fill a certain niche without encroaching too much on each other's territories. The biggest issue I have with the core gameplay of Half-Life is the movement. Our protagonist, Gordon, is slippery. Usually, this is not that big of a problem until you realize there's a decent amount of jump puzzles in the game. Also, the mid-air movement feels a bit off. Yes, you can stop your momentum by trying to move backwards, but trying to land and just moving mid-air in general is still not that good. Other than that, I found the game to be a bit glitchy. I heard that Half-Life Source has a lot of issues with glitches and it's just a bad port in general, so I played the original instead. That being said, I still had a couple of annoying glitches. The ones that stick out as particularly annoying are the one time that one of the bosses got stuck and I was unable to progress the boss fight, and a couple of times when I got stuck in the ground immediately after entering new areas. Finally, the game itself is divided into around 18 chapters, and while some of them are incredibly memorable, others are annoying. I'll get you. And you're gonna rue the day you sat in that helicopter, you hawk-eyed piece of garbage. Most people would consider On a Rail or Zen the worst parts of the game. I must disagree and say that this warehouse section of Surface Tension is the absolute worst part of all of Half-Life. What kind of sick person does this? Why is this warehouse nothing but trip mines? So, we listed most of the things I don't like about this game, but what makes it so iconic? Well, to start, this game completely changed the way first-person shooters were made, and it's funnily enough visible from the moment you start the game. Where most shooters would drop you into the action immediately or after a short cinematic or skippable intro, Half-Life gives you a slow-paced introductory ride through the Black Mesa complex, in which it shows off the setting and all the cool sci-fi stuff that's being done in the facility. You don't actually get to shoot a gun until the third chapter of the game. While it may not sound huge nowadays, back in the time this was a huge step for stories in first-person shooters, and the good sections really make going through the more problematic parts of the game worth it. In conclusion, the game is older than 20 years, and it shows, but that doesn't stop it from being all in all an enjoyable experience, for the most part.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
Half-Life looks good for its day and age. Once again, at this point it's pretty old, and you can't really ignore that, but the models still look decent without ruining the feel of the game. I would even go as far as to say that this game looks a bit better than System Shock 2 when it comes to character and weapon models, even though it came a year earlier. The special effects are nice too and give a unique feel to the game. The areas are fairly diverse, and every set piece looks different and interesting, from the collapsing laboratories of Black Mesa to the wholly alien and unique Zen with its inhospitable environments. I can't really find a truly negative thing to say about the graphics, except the age of the game, but I kinda feel like that's a bit unfair, seeing as these sorts of graphics were incredible back in the day when this was made.
You find this all rather fascinating?
There's a reason why there are so many memes out there using Half-Life sound effects. They're not incredible, the voice acting on the characters isn't all that good, and it all feels a tiny bit off. That's why it's amazing though, because the sounds of this game are iconic for their special flair. I feel like if the effects of the game were completely realistic, they wouldn't be nearly as memorable and memeable as they are now. And through these inherently gamey sounds, the sound direction of this game becomes incredible. And while we're on the topic of incredible, this game has a great soundtrack to boot. The soundtrack is so iconic, in fact, I've heard people refer to it as its own genre, Half-Life music. Not only does it sound great, it plays throughout the story in a well thought out manner too. It rarely feels out of place or distracting, and usually adds to the atmosphere to the point where you might not even notice the more subtle tracks in-game, but will definitely recognize them when listening to the soundtrack later. All in all, I'd say Half-Life has great sound design on all fronts.
I never thought I'd see a resonance cascade, let alone create one.
So, the game starts with the aforementioned tram ride. You are late for work and you find out that the facility is having minor technical difficulties today and that you just got a new and expensive test sample that you must experiment on. You're the one who needs to do the manual part of this experiment and you are assured that the chances of something going wrong are minimal. What could possibly go wrong? Just another day at the job, I guess. You try to get out of the facility and get somewhere safe, but the aliens are invading and the armed forces are containing. Containing what? The mess you caused. There's one tiny problem with that. Containment procedure kinda means no witnesses. I'm sure that won't be a problem in the slightest. Okay, so I guess that is a bit of a problem, but there's a solution. You just have to help the team at Lambda Core fix the alien invasion caused by you poking a big hole through dimensions, and then get out of the whole mess alive. So you spend half the game going to Lambda Core, get knocked out, survive, keep going to the Lambda Core, where they tell you that you have to go to the aliens' homeworld and stop the alien overlord behind all this in order to fix this big mess. Super big spoilers from now on, so if you haven't played this game and are interested in playing and experiencing it for yourself, skip this part of the video, I guess. You arrive at Zen, and there you get to face two bosses. Both of them are not quite fun. Don't get me wrong, I consider Gonarch better than both System Shock 2 bosses, but Nihilant, he's just plain annoying. The boss fight itself is nothing especially challenging. The biggest challenge of the fight is not dying due to the fall damage because you landed at the edge of the jump pad and not Alt F4ing on the spot when you get teleported by Nihilant himself. Other than that, you just gotta break his defense crystals, shoot him until his head splits open, and then shoot his portal brain. The gravity in Zen is lowered so the movement is a bit more off than usual, but the gravity when fighting Nihilant is even weaker, and I think it's here that the game's wonky mid-air controls are the most noticeable. The additional areas that Nihilant teleports you to feel like filler, and there's only like 3 or 4 of them, so if you get teleported a lot, it gets repetitive. After the fights, however, you're greeted by the G-Man, a mysterious person whom you could see multiple times throughout the game. He congratulates you on a job well done, then takes away all your stuff and threatens to murder you if you don't start working for him. He gives you a choice between die and work, and I think the choice here is pretty obvious. He hires you and the game ends there, well set up for the sequel that came out in 2004. All in all, the story itself isn't something special, but it's miles ahead of what we usually had in first-person shooters at the time. The gameplay is still the main reason why you would get this game, but the story provides a nice addition that works in tandem with the gameplay, all while being decently enjoyable. The twist at the end is great, but other than that, there isn't anything all that special in the story.
Analysis is going to run perfectly today, don't you think?
There are a lot of people out there who praise Half-Life like it's the holy grail of video games. It's good, there are a lot of things it does very well, but in the end, I feel like it gets too big of a reputation. The claims that this is the best game ever are not baseless, but the game has flaws, and those flaws are noticeable, especially after 20 years. However, I still recommend the game and believe it to be one of the better FPS games of the time period. If you like first-person shooters and good environments and don't mind controls that are a bit slippery at times, I definitely recommend Half-Life. In the meantime, I am taking a break from old FPS games and trying something else next video. Hopefully it sticks. See you all then, and if you haven't, go watch my System Shock video, no matter how bad it is.